With Bitcoin seemingly in the early stages of a bull cycle, many are curious if a shrinking supply of liquid BTC and an ever-growing retail and institutional demand could result in a bigger cycle than ever before. Are we on the verge of a Bitcoin supercycle? Today we're going to be doing a roundup to discuss Bitcoin's current conditions as well as the potential for a BTC supercycle. And as we can see, BTC growth since our current cycle lows is looking pretty healthy, pretty good in fact, pretty much in line with what we'd expect given where we are in the cycle, probably in the early stages of a bull market. We can see compared to the previous bull cycles, it's pretty much in line, potentially some chop ahead, maybe a little bit of drawdown potentially, but ultimately we can't really complain. One thing we do need to acknowledge is in every single cycle there has been diminishing returns. We could see that from this 2011 to 2015 cycle, there's about 50,000% returns. We can see in the 2015-2018 cycle, there was over 9,000% returns. And we could see in the 2018 to 2022 cycle, nearly 2,000% returns from cycle lows to peak. One interesting thing is that's reducing about 5x every single cycle. So at that current pace, if we were to expect about 400% returns, given the fact we're dividing this 2,000% by 5, then we'd maybe only be seeing about a $75,000 Bitcoin peak this cycle, which wouldn't be terrible, but I think a lot of people are maybe anticipating a little bit higher, especially considering the market dynamics and how a shift in the supply and demand economics of Bitcoin may be about to really bring on what many have called a supercycle, a far extending and sustained price action rally to the upside. So what would actually cause this supercycle? Well, first and foremost, we need demand. And ultimately, we can see that retail demand has been growing pretty much exponentially. We can tell by the smaller BTC wallets. This pretty much has been on an uptrend for years now. Since 2018, late 2017, when this topped out, this has practically been on a non-stop rise to the upside. And we can see from pretty much every other chart of addresses holding that we are seeing retail adoption. We're seeing people buying up BTC, potentially to use as a peer-to-peer electronic currency, maybe, potentially just to add into their investment portfolios. But who knows? Ultimately, this is a very good sign, especially alongside the fact that we're not seeing any selling yet. We're seeing people accumulate BTC to hold BTC. If we just remove a number of these hodl waves, which are representing the percentage of BTC that hasn't been moved in a specific age band. So for example, the 7 to 10 age band is currently sitting at around 5%, which means 5% of BTC hasn't been moved in a 7 to 10 year period. But like I said, if we just remove all of these apart from the 6-month one, we can see that the amount of BTC that hasn't moved in at least 6 months is over 80%. There's only about a 20% supply of liquid BTC, which is a crazy small amount, especially if we can see that this is very much trending to the downside. We can see that even though people are accumulating, this isn't even to mention all the potential institutional accumulation through ETF. If we just look at retail adoption as well as the increasing illiquid supply of Bitcoin, we can see that there's just not enough supply to meet demand, or at least in the future, there probably won't be. And what this really reminds me of is a few years back, a similar situation with a little stock named GameStop. So this had an overwhelming amount of institutions shorting the stock, which ultimately led to a little bit of a price increase. We can see here that price was around $1. This is just on the weekly chart. And as people were seemingly growing aware of the fact that these institutions would have to cover their shorts by buying if price were to increase, we could see that it had a very positive reaction on price. If I just change this to a logarithmic scale, you can maybe see from around $1 to well over $100, nearly $120 at its peak. So could something like this happen to BTC? If everyone's trying to buy BTC, but there simply isn't enough to buy, the price will just rapidly increase. It's as simple as that. Another thing we also need to consider is with this increase in demand, with this reduction in supply, of course, supply and demand economics play into account, but we also need to take into account the denomination. If we look at Bitcoin versus the Turkish lira, for example, not that chart. If we look at the Binance chart, Bitcoin versus the Turkish lira has gone exponential. It's just continued to rally to the upside far above the previous all-time high. And this is because we also need to take into account the potential debasement of what we measure Bitcoin against, the fiat currency. If we go to BTC versus the DXY chart we can see here, you'll be able to see that Bitcoin and the US dollar have a pretty inverse correlation, where the dollar strength is increasing, we usually see Bitcoin decreasing. And over the past year, we've seen Bitcoin begin to rise as the dollar has fallen. But we are potentially getting some early indications that this fall of the dollar may continue, like we saw with the Turkish lira, like we could see with potentially other currencies we're not going to cover today. If we look at something like global liquidity, which you can now actually use for free on a sample chart and look into Bitcoin, we can see that as global liquidity is increasing, this is the amount of fiat currencies in circulation from all global banks, we can see that this is increasing, which again has a very strong correlation to Bitcoin's price. If the amount of fiat currencies in supply is increasing, therefore the demand is maybe decreasing because people don't want to lose all their wealth to inflation, they're going to look to an asset potentially like Bitcoin, which has the complete opposite. It has a decreasing available supply and a massively increasing demand. So once you actually combine the supply and demand economics of these two different factors, Bitcoin and whatever we're denominating it against, a supercycle isn't out of the question. So if we were to see a potential exponential rally to the upside, where could we maybe look to? Because as we said, if we're seeing diminishing returns over the past few cycles, maybe $75,000 or who knows what Bitcoin's price could peak at. If we were to see something like this, something radically to the upside, maybe something like the Bitcoin rainbow price chart could give us a little bit of indication. We can see the diminishing returns in effect here. If we just isolate over the past 3 cycles here, we can see that first we peaked well above this rainbow, then in the red area, then in the orange area. So maybe in this cycle, $75,000, it may only reach this green or yellow area. Who knows when we'll reach the next all-time high. But if this super cycle were to happen, then it kind of breaks the expectations of diminishing returns. Maybe we reach a similar band to what we met in the previous all-time high. Maybe we meet a band in the one before that. Maybe we reach this upper echelons of $400,000-$500,000 a Bitcoin. Of course, this is all wild speculation. But then, of course, whenever we talk about future price predictions for Bitcoin, we need to take into account the stock to flow model, which is also predicting a fair valuation of BTC after the halving event of $450,000. So maybe it isn't too far out of the ordinary to maybe anticipate that this could be a possibility. Of course, I'm not saying it's a certainty. Within investing, you can never be certain on anything, but a super cycle, while maybe unlikely, given the fact that we need to look at historical trends to get the best idea of what's probable going forward, we need to be open to all possibilities. Also, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to ensure you're receiving all of our content as soon as it's released. And make sure to check out all the resources we've discussed today, as well as the many more that are all available on lookintobitcoin.com, your #1 source for Bitcoin information. So just to summarize, a Bitcoin supercycle is the theory that BTC could enter a sustained bull cycle that would see considerably higher prices than many are probably anticipating. And a number of converging catalysts could contribute to this supercycle, such as growing adoption, denomination debasement in the US dollar, and we could see from other global fiat currencies, and increasing illiquidity. Really, it's simple supply and demand economics, both like we said on the Bitcoin side of things and on the fiat currency side of things. And while speculation of potential outcomes is fun, our best approach is to consider historical trends, which are diminishing returns due to a growing market cap. Simply put, if Bitcoin's market cap is $1 trillion compared to $100 billion, it's 10 times harder to move that market cap considerably higher just because of the amount of money required. But who knows, maybe with the ever decreasing liquid supply, we can kind of throw these models out of the window. So we really need to prepare for every outcome. If you like this video, then please visit lookintobitcoin.com, where you can also consider becoming a site subscriber to gain access to professional resolution charts, advanced macro and portfolio data tools, in-depth crypto industry reports, live and personalized indicator alerts, private TradingView scripts, and more, all for a fraction of the standard industry price. And let me know what your thoughts are on Bitcoin's current price action, as well as the potential for a future BTC supercycle. Do you think it's completely impossible? Do you think it's likely to happen? Who knows? As I said, let me know down in the comments below and on social media. I look forward to reading and replying to all of them. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.